we're broadcasting this event on both YouTube and Facebook on QMSA's social media accounts. So first of all, QMSA is under a larger association, which is the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. And it's a non-profit organization and a non-governmental that was founded in 1951. And with its ultimate goal is to help medical students unite for global health. It helps young medical practitioners and medical students to develop their leadership skills. And in addition to that, IFMSA is also recognized by the United Nations system and the World Health Organization. So a brief about IFMSA. We're basically 140 national member organizations, which is around 129 countries. And basically the association is so big that it represents more than 1.3 million medical students all over the world. We at QMSA Qatar were founded in 2017, and we gained full membership in IFMSA in August of 2019. Under QMSA, we have six committees, and SCORI is one of those six committees. We're the Standing Committee on Research Exchange. So basically, our main aim at SCORI is exchange programs, research exchange program. But due to COVID, we're so planning and organizing some fun events that are all research centered. So in QMSA, we have two committees that are really concerned with exchange. We have SCORI, which is concerned with research exchange, and we have SCOPI, which is considered the standing committee on professional exchange or clinical exchange. We are the largest student-run. We run the largest student-run exchange program, and we offer more than 1,500 research projects that benefit more than 3,000 students. And as you can see here from this chart, the number of medical students who are benefiting from our programs are on the rise. So this brings my presentation to an end. I'll just show you a brief about the agenda of today. After me will be Faraz, who is the president of QUEDC, the Qatar University English Debate Club. And then Lina Al-Ali, who is the president of the Student Research Association at Cornell Medicine Qatar, who will be introducing their organizations or committees. After that, we do have Dr. Susu Zugair, who is our chief guest. We will have a short introduction before that by Faraz. So please, Faraz, please do take over after Lina to introduce the debate. Faraz, the floor is yours.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. So unfortunately, I haven't prepared a pretty presentation or anything, so you guys will have to, well, look at me, I guess. I don't know if that may be good or bad. But good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you guys are, wherever you guys are watching from. So it's a life skill in the modern day. It develops the mind to be critical of anything it perceives and gives students the necessary skills to become leaders of tomorrow. So our club was initially established in 2008 as Qatar University Debate Club. We primarily debated in the English language, and then we restructured to Qatar University English Debate Club, QUEDC, in 2019. We focus on a few things, but we concentrate primarily on debating, critical thinking, teamwork, and public speaking. These are our four main focus points. So QUEDC, we debate in the British parliamentary style, but we're also open to other debate styles and related debating activities. The primary purpose of our debate club is to create excellent debaters, critical thinkers, and by extension, future leaders. So to achieve this, we have a constructed plan where we increase members' awareness on critical analysis of current affairs, educate members on a vast array of topics, along with developing their ability to grasp an understanding of important matters that affect them in every sphere of their lives. So these could be political issues, social issues, moral, economic conflicts, social political events, etc. We also like to educate members in a way which allows them to be more accepting and understanding of the diversity of cultures, traditions, and societal norms in the 21st century. We also train members in critical skills such as public speaking, the art of persuasion, effective communication, negotiation, and leadership skills. We finally would like to create a friendly and comfortable environment where members can safely and openly discuss different kinds of issues, keeping in mind like nothing said by the members in a debate or a discussion necessarily represents their own personal beliefs because they are assigned these roles and they just do it for the sake of the competition, for the sake of the debate. So please do not hold it personally against specific debaters if you do not agree with something they necessarily say. With that, that's the gist of Qatar University English Debate Club. And I would like to thank you and hope you enjoy the collaborative event. And I think Lena will be taking over from me.
Hi everyone, salam. So my name is Dina Al-Ami, and I have been the president of the Student Research Association at Cornell Qatar for the past academic year. And now when it comes to research, we usually think of having a correct or definitive answer to find. So why would a club like the SRA be part of hosting a debate where there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer we're looking for? Well, I'll tell you why. Our club was founded by students for students. Of its core aim is the promotion of scientific discussion, of which ethics play a major role in. Our debate today will undoubtedly encompass a set of ethical questions that we as students of the health sciences specifically cannot neglect. Now, thanks to the efforts of our wonderful debaters, we will be presented with multiple viewpoints, backed by substantial evidence to support it. And then from there, we hope to further understanding of the topic in question and come to shape an informed opinion. And the weight of an informed opinion is proven to be more vital and yet rare, unfortunately, in our day-to-day. In the age of rapid spread of information and misinformation, I feel like as a person, and this is something I fall into as well, we can form opinions based off of, for example, just random social media posts we see these days. And that's just one example. Now, for us as students of the health sciences and professionals one day, inshallah, as we progress through our careers, we will find that our opinions will be valued more and more. And so I have to remind myself before anyone else that we have to be careful when we provide information and when we give opinions. And we must also present them in a manner that's understandable to those who are not experts in the field. I know it's easier said than done. Thank you. I won't take long. Thanks to everyone who's here today and to the organizing committee. And I hope that this session will be of good use of your time. Thank you. I'll pass on to Farazi.
Oh, it's me again. Sorry, I'm turning off my camera because I got notified that I was lagging a bit. So I'll just do that. We'll see how things go. So hello again. So now I'm going to be taking over and talking about the introduction to debate and introduction to judges. So before we move into the actual debate, it is important for our audience, whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or whether you're even on the Zoom call, and everyone to understand and consider a few things. So 3 main things. The first one is the schedule. Now we had a brief discussion over it where Salah took over. But after this introduction to the debate, our chair, AQ, Abdul Quddus, will be introducing the speakers before we head off to the debate. The debate shall commence, and once concluded, the judges will move to the breakout room where they will deliberate the results. During this time, the audience will be able to participate, because voting will be open to the audience members on which team they think deserves to win this debate. Moreover, there will be a question answer session during this time. This is where the floor will be open to the audience members, where questions and comments will be taken in from Facebook and YouTube, or even the Zoom call. We will then have the judge's verdict, where they will also provide valuable feedback to the debaters, and then we will conclude the event. Um, so when it comes to debating, you have various formats. For example, a presidential debate or a town hall debate, and other formats that are far more structured. Every format has some kind of rules. Because those rules serve to preserve order and try to create some balance, they try to create some balance, right? These rules do not determine necessarily who wins or loses in a debate. So in every debate format, there will be some direction about the topics, about the timing, about speaking order, and maybe some stuff about judging criteria and about how you decide which team wins and which team loses. Today, we're going to focus on the Asian parliamentary debate format. So this is a format that is widely used in Asia among university and high school students. Now, in the Asian format, you have two teams. One team is called the government or affirmative team, and the other team is called the opposition or negative team. These names don't really matter that much, but it's just for you to understand the terminology. So moving on, the government team will always support the topic, and the opposition team must oppose the topic. Debaters, again, will not have a choice whether they are government or the opposition. So therefore, these are given to them, and again, they have no choice. So it is important to note that what the debaters are saying do not represent their own personal views, and that it is solely for the debate. Now, in our debate here, each team will have 4 speakers. There will be 3 in the government and 3 in the opposition, and they will speak in alternating order. So first, you will have 1 speaker from the government team, and then 1 speaker from the opposition team, and then the government team, and then the opposition team, and it'll go for another government and another opposition. Now, each speaker will speak for 7 minutes, but that's not it. We said there were 4 speakers. So the debate is still not done. Both teams will go and make an extra speech, and this is what the 4th speaker is there for. It is a summation speech of sorts, where you are comparing the teams and you're trying to persuade the judge why that specific team or your specific team should win over the other team. So it is not really a speech where you are making new arguments, but it is something where you're summing up everything that we have heard so far. So at the end of the 6 speeches, the teams get to make a reply speech. And this is what is done by the 4th speaker in their teams. This one is shorter, and earlier speeches are longer, which AQ will be talking to you about. Lastly, we now have our judges for today. So I'll be giving a quick introduction. So first and foremost, we have I would like to introduce our highly esteemed guest judge, Dr. Susu Zuhair, who is an associate professor of microbiology and immunology, trained as a clinical microbiologist and earned a diploma in clinical microbiology from the University College London. And furthermore, her MSc is in medical microbiology and PhD in microbiology and immunology from Cardiff University. She did her postdoctoral training at Harvard Medical School in Boston, USA. Dr. Zuhair was an assistant professor at the Department of Microbiology and Immunology at the Emory University School of Medicine in Atlanta, before she joined Qatar University's College of Medicine in fall 2017. Her research interests are focused on host pathogen interactions and vaccine development. She investigates antibiotic resistance mechanisms and implements nanotechnology for rapid detection of bacterial infections. Her translational research is focused on vitamin D immune modulatory effects. And to date, Dr. Zuhair has published more than 48 scientific research papers and has been awarded 2 patents on her discoveries. She serves as a scientific microbiology counselor for the International Endotoxin and Immunity Society, and she serves as a guest editor, an editorial board member, and an ad hoc reviewer for multiple international journals. Now moving on to the other 3 judges we'll be having from our various committees. So firstly, I would like to introduce Jasna Chalongal. She is the advisor and ex-president of the Student Research Association, SRA. She is a 4th-year medical student at Weill Cornell Medicine, Qatar. She joined Cornell Debate Society in 2018 and has been both a judge and a debater for the past 3 years. Um, she has represented Cornell at international events such as WDC, Worlds, and further has debated, adjudicated, and chaired numerous QUDLs. Tonight, she will be part of the adjudication panel as a member. Next, I would like to introduce to you the judging panel member from SCORI, Ahmed Daniel Nawaz. He is the General Assistant of the Standing Committee of Research Exchange. He is a fourth-year medical student at the College of Medicine in Qatar University, and he became a member of our QU EDC, Qatar University English Debate Club, in 2018. He participated in various QUDLs as debater. Furthermore, he has also participated as a debater in international debates. Finally, last but not least, I would like to introduce Abdul Quddus Abdul Basit. He is the advisor and former president of the Qatar University English Debate Club. Mr. Abdul Quddus has a bachelor's and master's in accounting from Qatar University. He is currently a PhD candidate at QU College of Business and Economics and is in the final year of his doctorate program. Abdul Quddus is highly skilled and experienced. Over the last decade, he has represented QU in multiple national and international debating tournaments such as WDC, EUDC, QUDLs, OIC debates, OEDC Kuwait, and a lot more. There are too many. Both as a judge and a debater. He has active experience in running discussion panels, judging debates, and has previously engaged in international events hosted by Doha Debates, Qatar Debates, Doha Youth Forum, and Qatar University. He has won multiple accolades for his participation and contribution in debating and training, and he will be the chair for tonight's debate. Now, before we move on towards AQ, I would like to invite Dr. Susu Zuhair to give a few remarks.
Okay, thank you very much for the very kind introduction, and I welcome you all, speakers, presenters, and the members of this very interesting debate club. I cannot tell you how exciting this subject for me as a judge to see it coming from future doctors, future pharmacists, and healthcare providers. When we think about patient safety as the most important pillar that we keep in mind when we deliver healthcare, so we think of drug safety, we think of patient safety, and therefore the debate for today is extremely important. We are looking forward to hear from you whether pharmaceutical companies should be allowed to fund research on their medications or not. And if yes, why? And if not, why? So I don't want to sway the argument in either way. I am looking forward to hear from all of you. So floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susu, for your kind words. We are really glad that you have accepted our invitation today, and you are going to be our guest judge. We are really excited for this. Thank you so much. Abdul Quddus, I'd like you now to start the debate and introduce the debaters.
Sure. I'm audible?
Yes,
perfect. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Firstly, thanks to everyone for being here today and inviting me to be the chair judge for today's event. It's really I would say an honor for me, a pleasure to join you all today along with the amazing panel of judges. That is Ms. Jasna, Mr. Ahmed Daniel, and Dr. Asusu, obviously, the most learned among us all, mashallah. And inshallah, hopefully it will be a great debate, and I wish all the debaters the best. As Faraz rightly mentioned to you earlier, this debate is known as the Asian parliamentary style, but we have tweaked it a bit more to ensure that we have 4 speakers instead of 3. Now, we'll be having 4 speakers on either side of the house, that is 1 for the motion and 1 against the motion. I'm just repeating in case for people who have joined a bit late, they can understand what we're doing today. And we'll be having a link that is open for the audience to vote for the team that they felt was most convincing to win this round and win this event, I would say. So you have to be fair, not because you're family and friends, you have to vote for the best speaker from your side of the vote or team from your end. Just ensure the team that has, ensure the best content, the best analysis, the best examples, review, reputations, style, I would say, all these things composing together. Or it's a more comprehensive performance than just public speaking. That's why debating is a bit different than public speaking. Debating involves all our critical thinking, reputations, analysis, involvement with the other team, and trying to convince the audience of their own sides. Now, we would request all the audience to, if who are on the Zoom call, who are watching us on YouTube, please try to engage with our speakers, but that will be at the end of the debate. Once the debate is done, you will have an open floor to engage with the speakers. Please do so, and inshallah, hopefully you'll have a good time learning new things with them and try to share your opinion as well. Now, if you have no confusion and if you have all debaters in the room, if I would like to call out one speaker by speaker, I would like to ensure all of them are here in the room so that we can start the debate. By the on-site proposition, Ms. Lubna Zar, are you here?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Lina Ahmed?
Yes, here.
Mr. Asad Khan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Mr. Yusuf Al-Najjar?
Present.
Thank you. On-site opposition, do we have Mr. Amina Jawadi?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Mr. Aisha Ahmed?
Yes, I'm here.
Mrs. Shamnak Sarkar?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Aisha Faisal?
Yeah, I'm here.
Thank you. Great. We have all, it's a wonderful thing when you have all these speakers ready for the round and they're all excited. Are you all excited, speakers?
Yes.
I can't hear anyone. Are you excited, guys?
Yes. Very.
Oh, I thought you were asking the audience. Sorry. No, yeah, we're good. We're good. We're ready.
Speakers, yeah. So for audience, what you can do is, obviously the link will be open as well, and you can put your comments in the chat box if you need to. And audience who have joined us via Zoom, ensure you are on mute. Please, any audience, please ensure you're on mute on the Zoom call so that we are able to listen and concentrate on the speaker's voice. Now, Mr. Faraz will be timekeeping for us today. He will have his notes available. Faraz, if you can show it, please, to the audience. He'll be posting in the chat at minute 1 and at minute 6. That means before minute 1 and after minute 6, the other team cannot ask the speakers any question. The speaker has the choice of accepting or rejecting the question. We at least expect you to accept one question to ensure there's much more interaction and the audience and to expect that you are engaging and you're challenging the other side as well. That being said, Faraz, if you can show 1 minute and the 6-minute tab, please. At minute 1, Faraz will be typing in the chat box 1 minute, and he will show on the screen 1 minute as well to ensure that the speakers know that your 1 minute is up and the speakers on the other side can ask you questions. Are we all fine and ready? Any questions for us to go? No? Perfect. For the motion, this House believes that pharmaceutical companies should be banned from funding research done in their own medications and or products. We invite the first speaker, Ms. Lubna Zar. Ms. Lubna Zar is from Qatar University, and she says, hope the audience enjoys the debate and vote for the team that truly deserves to win. Proud to propose. Ms. Lubna Zar, the floor is all yours.
All right, so I'd prefer POIs in the chat. Okay. Dear audience, did you know that 75% of all funding for clinical trials in America come from corporate sponsors, i.e. pharmaceutical companies? You might be thinking, well, that's a good thing. More power to them. Let them continue funding this research. However, today, as the proposition team, we will proudly prove to you why we need to completely ban pharmaceutical companies from funding all research about their own products. So, firstly, I will extensively explain to you why pharmaceutical funding is extremely harmful to the scientific and medical community. Then I will propose to you a new mechanism in which research should be funded. My teammate Lina will explain how pharmaceutical funding of research has a negative effect on the general population and how ethically banning pharma companies from funding research is the best course of action. Firstly, in the field of medicine, professional doctors are expected to practice evidence-based medicine, EBM. What this means is that when a doctor is prescribing any kind of medication or suggesting any medical procedure, they need to have a strong scientific evidence showing the effectiveness of this procedure. This EBM, evidence-based medicine, is the backbone of modern-day medicine. Without it, the whole medical profession will collapse. Evidence comes in the form of research. Scientists carry out research in order to measure the true effect of a pharmaceutical product. The study or research needs to be credible with little to no bias. And this is where the crux of my argument begins. If a research paper has many biases, then the research is considered weak. And therefore, we cannot trust the results and the conclusion from this study. Research that is either partially or completely funded by pharmaceutical companies that have developed the product will inevitably have biases. Many studies have shown that pharmaceutical companies' fundings has an extremely alarming influence on not only the agenda, but the design, the conduct, and the results of the research. What we mean by the agenda is the initial phase of the study in which researchers choose which research question they should answer. Industries tend to prioritize lines of inquiry or agenda that is focused on product or activities that can be commercialized. So basically the most amount of profit they could possibly make, and distract from research that could be unfavorable for their company. So you might be wondering, well, why are pharmaceutical companies so eager to fund research? Pharmaceutical companies are profit-driven. They could not care less about the effectiveness of the drug on the general population or the public health. All they want to do is to make as much money as possible from the healthcare system. A recent Cochrane study review has shown that pharmaceutical companies' sponsored studies overestimate the efficiency and underestimate the harm of their treatment, even when controlling for methodological biases. So as I mentioned, the methodological biases include biases in the agenda, biases in the design and the conduct, as well as the results. So, but even when we control these methodological biases, there has been shown an overwhelming support for these pharmaceutical company industry sponsored products. And for this reason, in order to remove all these biases that are in favor of the pharmaceutical company, we need to ban them from funding research about their own products, and therefore completely eliminating this issue that has been prevalent in our medical field. Time and time again, we see how money-driven pharmaceutical companies seem to stand in the way of sincere, hardworking doctors who just want to provide the best treatment for their patients. Doctors have no option but to use this biased research and prescribe new, overpriced medication that are not truly any better than the standard treatment. So I'll take a POI from Aisha opposition.
Yes, thank you so much. So you're telling me you want to ban all the pharmaceutical companies from funding the research. So what is your solution? Like, who would fund these research? Because they take billions of dollars.
Exactly. This is what I'm coming to right now. So the opposition, just like Aisha mentioned, might be wondering, what is the solution? Well, what are you going to bring forward? What we say is that the government will simply have to increase corporate taxes, and these multi-million dollar companies have to pay. As of the end of 2020, the total global pharmaceutical market is valued at about 1.27 trillion US dollars. This is a whole lot of money that is within the hands of these big pharma. And what we need to do is to get some of this money out of their hands and start to use it to fund national research centers. When the government is funding the research, the priority no longer is on making money or making profit and releasing drugs that make money, but the priority is now set on providing the best possible evidence-based medicine research, and that will benefit the general population, and therefore we will ensure that our whole population has the best medication with lower prices, so it will serve them better. Private companies that fund their own research will be able to release their medicines at a faster rate and get it approved by the FDA, because they no longer have to fund their own research. Why would you think that? Oh, why? You might be thinking, like, why would it make the process faster? Well, it's going to make the process faster because they no longer have to worry about all these conflicts and of interest and all these biases trying to get approval from all these different institutions. No, they no longer have to worry about getting approval for their studies. They're going to just have to rely on the government and rely on independent sources of money, which will provide them with income. Thank you very much. Proud to propose.
We'd like to thank the speaker for
remarks. Now invite the first speaker on side opposition, Mr. Amin Al-Jawadi. He's a first graduate from the Bakery High School for Health Professions and applicant of Dental Medicine at Qatar University. He says today, positive expectations are the mark of superior personality. The floor is all yours.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Amin Al-Jawadi, and I'm the first speaker from Team Opposition, here opposing the motion that states that pharmaceutical companies should be banned from funding research done in their own medications/products. First of all, I would like to point out that the first speaker from Team Proposition did not define the motion, so I would do so for them. I would start by saying that pharmaceutical companies or drug companies are a commercial business licensed to research, develop, market, and/or distribute drugs. Second of all, the word ban means officially or legally prohibit. Funding means money provided, especially by an organization or government for a particular purpose. Research, a systematic investigation into and the study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. And finally, medications is a drug or other form of medicine that is used to treat or prevent disease. As first speaker, I will be talking about, in my points, I will be talking about the government opacity and ineffectiveness, as well as many corruption that takes place within the government. Second of all, the free market, which is a really important point in here, since the free market drives us towards perfection and to the best product rising above all competition. My third point will be about how do we know if a study is reliable or not. My second speaker will be talking about the funding and how the private companies will be better able to fund this research than the government. She will also be talking about accountability and reputation of these private companies. And finally, she'll be talking about the responsibilities of the scientific journals in this issue. First of all, I would like to start off by rebutting the first speaker. So the first speaker came with a really, really weak solution, which is increasing the corporate tax on these huge government agencies, huge private agencies. But this thing, as which I will deal with my point, is anti-free market. First of all, having a really high taxes, because it will stop these companies from having all the funding and money to provide for this type of industry, for manufacturing drugs. And second of all, she said that increasing the corporate taxes this means that the money is directly going to research. But in a democratic government, as with you started off your speech by saying that 75% of the U.S. government of drugs in the U.S. government are funded by pharmaceutical companies. So if we go to a democratic government, most of the people, if you go around and ask, and anywhere, people would want free healthcare and free university education. So saying that increasing corporate taxes is somehow a solution for the enormous funding that we will have is a really silly solution in many ways. Since there are many things that people care about more, especially in a democratic government. I'd like to also point out that if you have any POIs, you can speak directly into the mic.
POI?
Yeah.
Well, by corporate taxes, we mean the taxes that the companies have to pay, not the taxes that the people have to pay.
I understand. Yeah, I understand that you mean that the companies are going to pay these taxes, but the companies are going to take these taxes, and these taxes will be used in what the people want in a democratic government. The people, most of the people, are less concerned about what you're talking about and more concerned about their university education. They would rather have free university education, and they would also rather have free Medicare for all the people, especially if in your example you were talking about the US. Now I'll go to my first point: government opacity and ineffectiveness. It can be a restriction, especially in a government with a bureaucracy system, which means that the process will take a long time, or a government with a corrupt system, which opens the door, on the other hand, to big pharmaceutical companies to approach the government instead. An example for this is actually in the United States. The world's biggest drug makers and their trade groups have cut checks to 356 lawmakers ahead of last year's election, more than 2/3 of the sitting members of Congress. It's a barrage of contributions that accounts for roughly $11 million in campaign giving, distributed via roughly 4,500 checks from political action committees affiliated with companies. Washington has responded with clear financial rewards for that work. Already, Congress has provided billions of additional dollars to the federal healthcare agencies aimed at helping fund drug company research. A recent proposal from Senate awarded BARDA, an agency largely tasked with funding drug company research, an additional $20 billion. Now, this year is an exception because of Corona. Previous years, they would fund them normally at $1.4 billion. Given this evidence presented, are we going to give the government blindly this power? Because the only other way to give it, even in the proposition's solution, is to take the money from the corporate taxes and give it to the government and let the government spend it. Are we going to let give the government blindly this power? If anything, we should try to take the government out of it, since the more the government is involved in this, the more corrupt the system is. The system becomes, instead of changing it for the better. The more government intervention only helps the pharmaceutical companies, since they are no longer liable or responsible for breaking the public trust or for the failing of their drug, since the government is the one to blame. Another point is the transparency. Pharmaceutical companies care about the public trust of the people, and so they are more transparent. Well, the government will do as much research as it possibly can behind closed doors or as classified research. In addition, this idea that you're talking about is anti-free market and anti-innovation, given that, for example, the National Institute of Health, which is a government-regulated body, which already funds some of the research, it can only test 10% of grant proposals. And that is only grant proposals. There are much more sectors in which we need research in, like the engineering field, space, military, and economics. And so this just takes the research down to less than even 10%. To conclude this point, I will say this, and I don't mean it lightly. The propositions team is anti-innovation, because why would a company manufacture a drug if it can't even be sure that this drug is going to undergo clinical trials, since only less than 10% of grant proposals are accepted for clinical trials? The second point is, how do we know if a trial is valid or this trial should be discredited? My second speaker will reach to that, since I do not have enough time for this one. Thank you. Is the time done?
We thank the speaker for the remarks. Now, moving on to the second speaker, our side proposition, it will be Lina Ahmed. Lina Ahmed is from Weill Cornell Medical College in Qatar, and she says today, we have put in a lot of hard work to support our arguments. and we hope the viewers enjoy the spicy debate ahead. Nina, waiting for the spicy debate.
Thank you for the introduction. I would just like to start by saying that I will take POIs in the chat preferably, and I will be starting in 3, 2, 1, go. So first of all, I would like to go back to my first speaker's point that seems to be misunderstood by the opposition, because we did not say that we will just increase corporate taxes blindly and then just shove the money on the government and then expect them to do something with it. We want these taxes to we understood that there is a complex problem here, that if the pharma companies are not able to fund their research, there must be another body that funds it. But it can't be that the government just takes that burden on its own. It has to take some of that it has to take some of the resources that the pharma companies already use for their research in order to do that research on their behalf and overcome any issues with conflict of interest. So that's why we suggested taking taxes from these companies to specifically fund research. He also stated that the government or people of the government have other interests in mind, like for example, education and free healthcare. The government doesn't just blindly follow what its citizens wanted to fund. Like for example, if he brought up repeatedly the example of the US government, the US government doesn't provide free healthcare, for instance, instead invests a lot of its money in the military. So it's not that the government would just blindly take money and use it according to what the citizens of its own country want. It would be obligated. The pharma companies won't provide the tax unless they know that the tax is going into funding research. So it would kind of hold the government accountable to do its job and fund the research according to these pharma companies' needs, but it would do it in a non-biased manner, is what we are trying to say. Now, going along with my argument, biased research is not only harmful to the scientific community, but also extremely harmful to the general population. This debate started off like my first speaker was talking about the scientific community, and the opposition seems to be focusing it on the government. But really, let's look at the problem at its root. Biased research is not only harmful to that scientific community, it's also harmful to the general population. Most of the general population are unaware about the accuracy and validity of research about drugs. For this reason, they are the most vulnerable to the effects of industry-funded research. Patients are the only people who actually suffer as a result of these ineffective treatments being pushed towards them. For example, prescription drugs are the third leading cause of death in Europe and the US, killing around 2,400 people per week. This is extremely alarming, and if we do not take measures such as completely banning these pharma companies from funding research, then prescription drugs will continue to kill these people. And I will show you a step-by-step analysis of how this biased research can result in these outcomes. But first, I accept the POI from Sean.
All right. So my POI is that you're saying that the government will be held accountable due to these taxes that are being placed on them. But are you saying that the government will be held more accountable than the companies themselves? Because the companies, as of now, are there's already a system of checks and balances. Lawsuits can be placed against them. But
Okay.
you cannot place lawsuits against the government. What can you say about this?
So just going back to this point of regulation, why are we proposing banning and not regulating? Because the POI that you just mentioned makes it seem as though the checks and balances are enough to stop pharma companies from what the conflicts of happening. But as Lubna clearly illustrated, there's clearly a problem happening when these companies fund their research. There's a lot of sneaky methods that these pharma companies use to bias or delay results. Like Lubna stated, they can also purposefully not fund research that investigates the harms of their medication. And what I meant by the government being held accountable, is I was referring to the point that if the government just throws the money somewhere else and does not actually use it to fund research, then pharma companies will not be paying taxes for them. Like it would just stop the process there as it is, because they're not going to be making a profit either way. These pharma companies will not be making a profit if their research is not being funded, so they're not going to pay the taxes in return. It's a lose-lose situation for them. So Now, going back to my main argument. So first of all, these pharma companies, as I was saying, they create research, they create biased research, and then present this research to doctors without actually giving them the full picture, and actually incentivizing these doctors through dirty methods like bribing the doctors to try and get them to replace existing effective medication for the pharma company's new medication. As a result, patients end up taking medication that's less effective or actually more harmful than the original standard medication that could also potentially be more expensive. A prime example of the dire consequences that could happen, as I stated before, is the opioid crisis that is currently happening in the US. Purdue Pharma, which was the producer of the most widespread pharma opioid, hid evidence and research about the detrimental effects of prescribing opioids, instead marketing opioids as effective with low addiction rates. It led to millions and millions of patients becoming addicted to opioids and their loved ones losing trust in the healthcare system that failed them. As such, allowing pharma companies to fund their own research leads to biased outcomes. And a point that was stated by the opposition, or the point that they were trying to circulate around, is that the government is corrupt, but they don't really show how the government corruption outweighs pharma corruption, especially in terms of addressing Lubna's points that prove how seriously, especially, and in tying that to my point about the opioid crisis, like they don't show how government corruption can override the existing problems that we already see in terms of corruption with pharma companies. Now, also, the problem with current research right now in the way it is funded is that the biggest and richest pharma companies are more likely to have their drugs approved because they can push out more research, while smaller companies are not able to push out their research even if it is more effective. So by introducing an independent committee set up by the government, it would actually assess these medications based on their effectivity and not on their profitability, as Lubna stated, and that's why we are very proud to propose.
We thank the speaker for the remarks. Now, to move on with the debate, we invite the second speaker on site opposition, Ms. Aisha Ahmed. She's a pharmacy student at Qatar University, and she says there's no fear when you are having fun. Aisha, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Am I audible? Okay. Before I start my speech, I would really appreciate if you can put your POIs in the chat, and I will accept them whenever it's convenient for me. So I will start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, judges, dear audience, and my fellow debaters. As the opposition side today, we are trying to show you why it is perfectly fine and justified to allow pharmaceutical companies to fund research done in their own medications. We are providing you with statistics, facts, examples, evidence, and everything you need to make you understand that we are the right side in today's debate. So without further ado, let's move on to my refutation first, and then my arguments, along with extending upon my first speaker's arguments. So firstly, the proposition's first speaker's weak solution was perfectly refuted by my first speaker, so there is no need to mention that at all. The second speaker of the proposition side talks about taxes and how we misunderstood the point. However, the speaker fails to understand the magnitude of the funds that are required to actually fund these research. Dear judges and audience, I will give you the statistics to make you understand how it is simply not possible for the government to fund the enormous amount of research that take place every year, even with the corporation taxes that was the proposed solution. Alongside that, the speaker kept talking about the bias factor, and I will tell you why the research won't be biased at all by mentioning my first speaker's point, which he was unable to mention, and I will further expand throughout my speech. So there is something called double-blind trials that I believe the proposition side is not aware of. In these trials, both the researcher and the subjects assigned are unaware of the treatment methods. Additionally, the clinical trials are overseen from start to finish by independent ethics committees with final checks made by a country's licensing authorities. There is no way for these companies to commit fraud or resort to any sort of bias while the research is going on, since they're constantly under supervision. These independent ethics committees are obviously not paid by the industry either, so they're strictly unbiased and only in favor of developing an effective new drug for the betterment of people. On top of that, why do you think these pharmaceutical companies would risk producing a harmful drug that would ruin their reputation and put them at risk for getting sued? The industry is well aware that if their drug ends up affecting a single person negatively, they are to face serious consequences and might have to pay a huge penalty or settlement. But you would probably think or ask that it's not a big deal for these rich pharmaceutical companies to pay these penalties, as they have billions of dollars from their businesses, right? I will tell you why it becomes more serious. There would be cases filed against them, and their license to ever carry out any sort of research further would be taken away. For example, in 2018, a pharmaceutical company named Theranos went bankrupt because of their designing of an ineffective product and their funding of false research. Therefore, pharmaceutical companies always make sure that their research is carried out in a rigorous manner and they carry out all their obligations thoroughly while still being under the supervision of the independent ethics committees. So the drugs under research that comes out to be the most effective and safe for people to use. Therefore, pharmaceutical companies funding their own research solves the funding situation alongside producing drugs that are more effective than already existing drugs almost every year. It's just a win-win situation. I will take the POI now.
So then why is the issue of biased research, which comes from pharmaceutical funded companies, why are there still biases that we're seeing that constantly that have been shown?
Thank you so much for your question. There is a reason why the double-blind trials were introduced in the first place, which I already mentioned in my speech. Maybe you failed to understand them. And on top of that, there are independent ethics committees, which were introduced as well, who always supervise these. So sorry, I will not waste my time anymore on that. Moving on, the pharmaceutical industry plays a vital role in financing the research required to develop new drugs, as I mentioned before. Now, this is also refutation to their funding solution. There are hundreds of thousands of clinical trials that take place every year. For example, in 2019 alone, around 195,000 clinical trials took place. The numbers increase each year, reaching a staggering amount of around 218,000 in 2020 and around 230,000 in 2021. Clinical trials make up the largest portion of the $266 million to $802 million estimated total cost to industry for bringing each new drug to market. So while grants from the National Institutes of Health, which is a government body, NIH, it's able to fund maybe the most basic research in academic laboratories, it is largely the pharmaceutical industry that bears the cost of identifying new molecular entities and testing them in animal models and human subjects. And as mentioned by my first speaker already, only 10% of the proposals are granted fund by NIH. So the rest of the 90% is simply rejected just because of lack of funds. 90% is a huge amount, ladies and gentlemen. So without the contribution of these pharmaceutical companies, it is just simply not possible to fund the development of new drugs. It is also not rational to depend upon the academic medical centers rather than the advanced pharmaceutical industries to carry out the drug research. This is because academic medical centers may be unable to perform all these tasks on their own. Most of them lack the integrated infrastructure of people with expertise in statistics, clinical trial management, quality of life, and economics needed to tackle these roles. So finally, my last argument about journals and scientific literature. As gatekeepers of these scientific literatures, journal editors play a critical role in limiting bias in trial reporting, which the proposition side mentioned, which the doctors follow, the EBM, right? Most peer-reviewed journals mandate that reports of clinical studies follow the consolidated standards of reporting trials. It's a set of guidelines issued by physician investigators. It makes sure that there is no sort of bias and involves all the different factors that might create bias. So members of the International Committee of Medical journal editors, ICMJE, they also specifically condemn all kinds of agreements between researchers and these editors. So in conclusion, the clinical trials themselves are monitored from start to finish by independent ethics committees, along with the final check by the country's licensing authority. And once these steps are done, the journal editors who are reporting these trials have to themselves follow a set of rules, along with which the ICMJE ensures that there won't be any sort of agreement between the authors and the pharmaceutical industries, and the funding is just simply from the companies themselves. So all these steps clearly point out the safety and the effectiveness of pharmaceutical companies funding the research done in their own medication. With that, I'm really proud to oppose today. Thank you so much.
We thank the speaker for her remarks. Now we'll invite the third speaker from side proposition, Mr. Asad Khan. He's a student at Qatar University in CMed, and he says today, choose the second option, that's passive income. The floor is yours.
Am I audible? Okay, so I'll begin 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. We're having a very entertaining night, are we not? With some very interesting things being said. Throughout the course of this debate, we have proven and demonstrated that from the other side of the house tonight, that pharmaceutical companies should be banned from funding research done in their own products. The goal of doing so would certainly not be to elaborate on the point being said on the first speaker and second speaker. The speaker would like to say that EBM is the backbone of modern day medicine. Without this, medical research will collapse. If we do not consider bias as a very important factor, we cannot move further on in this debate. Furthermore, I would like to address the House's attention to the opposing team has stated a number of inaccurate details. First of all, one minute. I'm sorry. Can you guys hear the azan? Is that distracting in the background?
That's fine.
It's fine. Okay.
Really, go ahead.
Okay. So I was going to say, sorry. Even if the company, large corporation, were found out that people were at risk, the point is to stop this from happening in the first place. That's why we're condemning these large corporations to be banned from doing this such research. And there were no solutions provided by the other opposing team. Okay. Another factor we have to look is the market in itself, the public trust of the people. Governments will do what? The free market has got nothing to do with this. The free market is to do with supply and demand. Funding has nothing to do with this. In terms of the free market, the proposition has still not given any evidence on how governments are more corrupt than the said pharma corporations in order for the anti-market point to make any sense at all. The clinical trials are one of the most important things that research undergoes. It is indefinitely impossible to remove bias from this. Even if we have double-sided clinical trials, there are other millions of trials. And a fact check, actually, an inaccurate situation here was that the second speaker of the opposition stated there are millions of clinical trials being tested, where that is not the case. Only 300,000 research have been conducted. So that is a fault in itself and providing false knowledge to the audience and the House here. Secondly, I would like to also say that from the proposition side, the tax will accurately be mandated throughout the bias research is the main problem. Most people are unaware of these ineffective treatments. Prescription drugs are one of the major causes of death in this industry. So why are we banning them? We're banning them because we need to stop these elite corporations from having their way, finding loopholes. If we cannot stop them, then we are entrusting these corporations to the wider world and putting our health at risk. So ladies and gentlemen, think about what the opposite of this motion is. If the House votes no against this motion, think about what the opposition of this motion is. To say that the value of education and free university education is more important than the health of these companies, or is it to do with we should our governments should be taxed more so that we can better form and accurate research. Thank you. I'll now be accepting POIs.
Okay, thank you for accepting a POI. So what is your backup plan when, let's say, the government is facing a huge financial issue and just cannot simply prioritize to fund these trials anymore?
Sorry,
because the burden of providing a solution is not on us, and it's on you. Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah? Can you hear me?
Hello?
Am I not
Hello?
audible to everyone?
Hello?
We
Can
could
you-
hear you.
Sorry, I did not hear you. You were saying, so, hello?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
I said, sorry, we can hear you. It's fine, you can go ahead.
Yeah, all right. So Asif, can you hear me now?
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Aisha, if you can put your question through the chat box, please.
Sure, I'll do that, sure.
Can you hear us? Yeah, I can hear you now, sorry. Is this audible? Hello?
Yes.
Okay, can I take the POI now? Hello?
Aisha, your POI, please.
Okay.
Okay, so what is the backup
Can
plan?
I get the POI? Please,
So what's your backup plan of the government is facing a huge financial problem and cannot prioritize to find these trials anymore, to fund these trials anymore? So the backup plan, so as the third speaker, I cannot provide any new information to the debate itself, but what I can provide are examples to this question that you have. So in regards to what previously has been said, we have said that another plan could be that we impose other taxes on other governing bodies to ensure that these financial situations do not affect the wider health community, because health is first and foremost the most important thing in our lives. Compared to education, compared to shelter, our health is most important. Thank you. Any other POIs?
Yeah. How do you reply to the point that independent ethics committees oversee the whole process of the clinical trials?
Government.
Already, this happens already, by the way.
Sorry, can you please rephrase your POI?
Independent ethics committees already oversee the clinical trials from start to finish. They supervise these clinical trials.
So is your POI a government economic crisis has nothing to do with funding an independent committee set by a government? Pharma companies can stop the research if the results aren't fair. Sorry, I did not get your POI.
Independent ethics committees,
yeah,
which are independent, they're not from the government and they're not from the pharmaceutical companies. They oversee the clinical trials.
Okay. So to that, so we have, so this government economic crisis has nothing to do with this funding and independent committee set up by the government. So pharma companies can stop the research if the results aren't favorable. They are more inclined towards maximizing profit rather than the benefit of the people. Any other POIs? No. I would like to also conclude in saying that prescription drugs is the fourth leading cause of death, and furthermore, I would like to say that the proposition team firmly believes that we should ban the funding of research to these governments in order for a better and prosperous future for the institutions. Thank you.
We thank the speaker for the remarks. Now we invite the third speaker from side opposition, Mr. Shaunak Sarkar, who is a pre-medical bio student at Well Cornell Medical College in Qatar. He says, one day I hope to become a grown-up. Well, I say growing up is an option, but growing old is not. Wish you all the best. The floor is yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay. Three, two, one. I'm starting. All right. So as a third speaker, first of all, I'll summarize what my team has made, the points that my team has made already, and then I'll go on to rebut the points that the proposition team has said. So first of all, one of our main points is that the government is opaque and it cannot be trusted 100%. The arguments of team proposition is based on the belief that the government is doing everything for the betterment of its population and that it has no other motives and other interests. But as my second speaker has already said, only 10% of the research that is submitted to the NIH is ever seen to fruition. And also, if we look at the budgets of major governments, we see that a very low percent is allocated towards research in itself. So if we implement the solution of putting corporate taxes on the companies that help manufacture the drugs that are bettering the lives of people, the companies that in the COVID pandemic, the private companies that help to cure, that help to distribute the vaccines and cure the population of the world, if we say that we are going to tax them and this is going to go to the government, what is to say that the government will not use it towards something else, as history has already shown us? Uh, as a Yeah, then one more point is that the accountability and the reputation of the companies. The private companies, as my first and the second speaker has already said, is they have a stake in upholding the reputation of their own companies and their own products, while the government in itself does not have any such uh, motives because they are the power and they might have political motives. And as I had already mentioned in a POI, which the first speaker wasn't able to answer properly, the companies have the risk of lawsuits and their consumers and their customers suing them, while the government does not have this burden. So this liability and this accountability ensures that there's a system of checks and balances and that the companies are always funding the best research. And we should also take into account that there are rival companies that have interest in ensuring that other companies are not having an unfair advantage, which just destroys the spirit of capitalism and the free market. So another point that our team has already made is the funding problem. The We see, if we look at the statistics, we see that clinical trials make up the largest portion of 266 to 802 million cost to the industry for bringing new drugs to the market. And in 2019 alone, 83 billion was spent on R&D in pharma companies. If you say that you're going to ban pharma companies entirely from funding their own research, there'll be a huge void in the research sphere. And who's going to fill this? You're saying the government will fill this. And to a lesser extent, let's say independent associations are able to fill this. But as I said before, is the government to be trusted in the first place when the already pre-existing system is working just fine? These, just 1 second. These instances of drugs going into the market and causing harmful effects are the exception and not the norm. And we should look at the light and we should see what good the pharma companies have already done in bettering the health of billions of people. Okay, I'll take your POI.
Don't you think the government would have the people's health in their best interest because they want their working population to be healthy and to not have biased research which could potentially lead them to die or have severe effects, you know?
Okay, you're saying that the government has the people's health in their best interest. So for this, I'll cite an example. Now, I have a question to all the people in this debate. Which is the only developed nation that does not have universal healthcare? I think you've guessed the answer already. It's the US. So if the US does not have universal healthcare, and when we see like countries like Qatar itself and countries like the Nordic countries, they have universal healthcare. But this huge nation, this US, it does not have universal healthcare. People have to pay exorbitant costs for their own healthcare. People go bankrupt due to their healthcare cost. And you're saying that the government has the people's health in their best interest. How can you say this when the private companies themselves are the ones that are basically making all of the healthcare equipment and the facilitating all the research? So I'm putting forward that example. You can take it as you will. Now, there's one more point that our team has already provided, that is the problem of funding. And I have already mentioned a bit of it, but I'm just going to elaborate it again. That private companies are better able to fund research than the government, and that has already been shown time and time again. The government does not have enough in its budget to allocate towards research. And if we take away the private companies, there'll be a void. And now, if we remove, another thing is that capitalism, if we remove the funding of private companies towards their own product, we are going, as the first speaker has said, against the spirit of free market flow and innovation in itself. Now, innovation is not always good. It might have its own good sides or bad sides. And moving forward, we must accept that no system can be perfect. We are not, our team is not admitting that the current system that is in place is perfect. No, there are obviously many failings of the current system. But the solution that Team Proposition is proposing is going to make things worse overall for everyone involved, all the parties involved. And with that, I would like to rest my case. Thank you.
Thank you for the speech. Now we'll move on to the reply speakers on both sides. Reply speakers will not be accepting any POIs, so kindly ensure both the teams, you are not supposed to ask any questions or any POIs to the reply speakers. Following the Asian parliamentary style conditions and rules, we'll give the first chance to side opposition to give away or to speak as a reply speaker. The reply speaker for side opposition is Aisha Faisal from Qatar University. She says, it might look like I am doing nothing, but in my head, I'm quite busy. Let's hope this business does not affect your performance and you actually perform much better than this. Aisha, the floor is yours.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Sorry to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off. I'm really sorry for this. The speaker will speak for 4 minutes. The reply speech on either side will be 4 minutes only. So Faraz will show you the notes at minute 1 and at minute 3 and minute 4. All right, thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. What we've seen from side opposition today is something practical and realistic. We have taken an approach that realizes how vital pharmaceutical companies are for funding. What we've shown you today is that banning these pharmaceutical companies from funding is only going to do more harm than good. What we've given you today are solutions, proper solutions, and reasons as to how these pharmaceutical companies are regulated and examined. On the other hand, the proposition has showed us that yes, okay, they have an idea that the government is going to replace these companies. But what they fail to realize is that there are so many problems related to that, and there's going to be a lack of innovation that comes from it. They're painting a fairy tale for you all with no proper solutions and many problems that come with it. Now, to settle this debate, what we need to do is see how these two teams have answered the big issues that were brought up. One of the main points that the proposition brought up was the bias. But we have time and time again proved that these issues can be solved. We have journals, peer reviews, double-sided investigations, and independent committees that already examine these. So they need to realize that all is not lost. There is someone examining all of that. And the second big issue that was brought up was funding. We have mentioned that there are a lot of funds needed, as one of my speakers has mentioned, but the government cannot fund them, and the government cannot. And the proposition has failed to give us a proper solution. All they're talking about is tax, but they don't realize that there's corruption taking place in the government. And okay, they can take this money, but who's to tell us that yes, that this government is using this money for medical research? The people are the ones that are suffering. The government is already failing us. Why should we motivate them more and give them more power? And the third point is the reputation. Yes, okay, and yes, pharmaceutical companies want profit, but what the proposition has failed to realize is that they want that why would they create a drug that will destroy their reputation, which in turn will make them lose more money. They want money, so why would they do this to lose more money? So they have this motivation to come up with a good product. They have motivation. All the proposition has done is accuse us. They even went to the extent of accusing us with false information. So dear audience, you can already see how they have failed to give us a solution while we proved that these pharmaceutical companies should be banned. We are being realistic about the situation, and realists are the one who actually provide a solution. With that being said, we proudly oppose, and this is why we should win. Thank you.
We thank the speaker for the remarks and for giving us a concluding speech or the reply speech for side opposition as a whole. Now for the last speaker of this public event, and to close the side case for side proposition, the reply speaker is Mr. Yusuf Al-Najjar. He's from Wales Cornell Medical College in Qatar, and he says, or probably he's got a question, to pharma or not to pharma? That is the question. All the best.
Hello, everyone. So I'll just give me 1 minute to organize my speech.
Yusuf, you with us?
Yeah. Can you hear? Hello?
Yes, I could hear you.
Thank you.
Okay. So 1 minute. I'll just organize my speech and I'll get right to it. Okay. So as the final, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. I'll start. As the final speaker of this debate, I will wrap up and highlight the main clash points that were visible in this debate and why our team should win this debate. Now, the main points that the opposition team has addressed do not stand because of ethical, financial, and efficiency reasons. Let's look at the point that the proposition team presented. In the beginning, there was an extensive explanation about the harm that self-funding research by pharma companies pose on the population, themselves, and other competitors. We highlighted the effect that biased research inflicts on the manipulation of data for profit, irrespective of the accuracy, irrespective of the accurate efficacy and harm that their drugs have on the health of the public. Also, they act like every study done by these pharma companies can be reviewed by an independent ethical board, which is obviously not the case. And even if it was, these pharma companies can manipulate outcomes by stopping favorable studies from being published. In one example, a pharmaceutical company delayed for 7 years the publication of a study concluding that its widely prescribed preparation of levothyroxine was no more effective than less expensive generic formulations. Additionally, pharma companies don't necessarily peddle out harmful drugs, resulting in lawsuits, but can also peddle out less effective and more expensive drugs. Opposition asked for a possible alternative to these funding opportunities, in which proposition accurately replied with already prevalent sources of funding for pharma companies' research that diminishes bias as well as maintain the necessary funding to efficiently research and develop novel drugs. They also try to POI us and say that the government experiencing an economic crisis, they cannot fund research. Again, do they not understand that the government's sole responsibility would be to set up an independent committee for pharma research towards which funds will go? It's not a government branch. We repeat, it's a committee set up by the government to service pharma companies, but it will indiscriminately fund research about pharma based on effectiveness and not profitability. Small and large companies have the same opportunity to get research funded. With the introduction of the opposition side, there was mention of corruption that existed in governmental authorities. Rebuttals took place against the alternative method of research funding by bringing up a point about the obstacles that pharma companies face with the division and expansion of their company. What the opposition doesn't realize is that we are dealing with multi-million, even billion-dollar companies. Furthermore, the opposition team failed to tackle the points of bias by lightly highlighting transparency. They mentioned anti-free market and innovation when in reality it's just restrictions imposed to deal with ethical obligations that these large chain companies have to meet, as they, with the research they are doing, directly affect the health of the public. Also, they pretend that the ways that pharma companies manipulate are clear-cut. Okay, I was just checking the time. They pretend that the ways that pharma companies manipulate are clear-cut when they aren't. There's various methods that pharma companies use to abuse the current system, and an ethical board or double trials won't solve that. Proposition then responded to the misunderstanding that the opposition has with the alternative proposed earlier by the proposition about corporate tax by accurately defining the parameters and purpose of the alternative. We then went further on to elaborate on how bias plays a major role in the development and transparent side effects of drugs. Bias is introduced when the pharma company's sole purpose is to profit from their development, especially if they were the ones that were in charge with funding their own research when COIs are clearly visible. If COIs are not dealt with transparently, bias in research or the appearance of any biases can be extremely detrimental to the integrity of research and erode the public trust in the research enterprise. This is further elaborated with specific research and examples provided by about the opioid crisis, another example that the opposition has failed to tackle. Opposition further tried to refute some of the points posed by the proposition about alternatives. They mentioned strict regulations about research and development purposes that contradict the first speaker's point about the restriction of of company expansion. And these regulations cripple the growth of these companies as they would have liked. The opposition mentioned that most funding, is my time up? My time is up, okay.
All right. We thank the speaker for the remarks. Sadly, it was over time, so we can let him to complete the speech or the reply speak as a whole. Now, we'd like to thank all the 8 speakers from both the teams. Now, what will happen is, firstly, I think our member Atif, who's going to help us with the vote collection from the audience and help us with the scoring as well. He will publish or he will share a link with you on the various channels, probably on the Zoom call we are in right now, the Zoom meeting, on YouTube, and as well, I think, on Facebook, if possible. So the audience, your time starts now until we are back, probably 10 minutes from now, that is 8:35 maximum. The link will be on until, so you can have access to the link and vote to your team. And you should probably also mention why you would like to vote for this particular team. That's 2. And now what will happen is the judges, Dr. Susu, Ms. Desna, Mr. Ahmed Daniel, and I, Abdul Quddus, will be moving on to a breakout room. And in the meantime, for the 10-15 minutes that is upcoming, you'll get time to engage with our speakers, with each other, with the organizers, that is Mr. Muhammad Salah, Ms. Lina, and all the organizers that are available in this particular room. So you can interact with them, ask questions, post your comments, engage with them, and I hope, inshallah, you will learn a lot from that engagement as well. So thank you very much, Muhammad Salah, over to you, and we'll move on to the breakout room. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Abdul Quddus. We'll see you in a while. Like we will coordinate this with Atiq. So when you're done, we'll close the voting. Atiq, have you made the rooms?
Yes, most of them have moved there.
So please, for the judges, when the message pops up, please click join the room. For the audience, please, if you do have any questions, please leave them in the chat box or raise your hand so that we can allow you to open your mic and speak up.
Feel free to ask questions on the YouTube or Facebook chats too. I'll be reading them out.
Yes, the link is on the YouTube channel. It's now on both YouTube and Facebook accounts of QMSA Qatar. And you'll find the link as well in on the chat box on Zoom. So in the meantime, if you do not have any questions, please feel free to go grab a drink or a coffee.
Someone has a question.
Yeah. Go for it, please.
Please unmute your mic and you can ask the question to whoever it is.
Hello, can you hear me? Yes, I have a question. How will pharmaceutical companies who do not have enough reputation to attract funds, how will they be able to do the research?
Who is your question directed to? If you could mention who the question is directed to and then ask your question. The proposing team, the question was for you.
Well, we believe that in case this this motion goes ahead in real life, inshallah, one day, then the government who will create an independent body that these research companies will have to apply for funds, and basically if that independent body thinks that your pharmaceutical medication or product is worth it's worth it to fund this product, then obviously you would get the fund. And obviously when you get that funding, then you don't need to be a very the best possible, like you're not going to be like the richest company. It depends on your or on your product. It doesn't depend on how rich you are or how well known you are.
There was a reply from the opposition speaker, from Amin Al-Jawadi.
Yeah. So as we mentioned already in our debate, there is already a committee that does these clinical trials, but due to the limited funds and the the enormous money that companies need, that anybody would need to do clinical trials on these drugs, as we have said, 266 million around on average. It's actually the biggest portion of the drug manufacturing is the clinical trials. There is no way. And the thing that we talked about is the NIH, National Institute of Health. It already does clinical trials, but due to the enormous budget that they need, only 10% of these drugs are the ones that go through, of the clinical trials are the ones that go through, which is why us as team opposition, we were saying this idea is anti-innovation, because no drug company is going to make a drug in which it cannot even guarantee that this drug would be clinically tested. 90% probability that it will not be clinically tested. And this is why we already said that this is anti-innovation.
Thank you for that. Does proposition want to reply to that, or do we have any other audience members that would like to ask any questions, whether it be on YouTube, Facebook, or through the Zoom call? Any comments, discussions, thoughts, something you feel that was missed, something you feel that could have been added to this debate? Anything you would like to say, please come forward and do so. If we do not have people coming forward, I will end up picking on people and forcing people to talk. I will be asking you guys questions on what you guys thought of the debate specifically. So please, if you would like to come forth, please do so. If not, I will start picking on people. Anyone? Okay. So, oh, okay. There's Saad. Saad would like to congratulate both sides of the team, both sides of the house. I feel like Saad is trying to avoid being questioned. Saad, since you're here and since you volunteered to type in the chat, could you, and so I know that you're here, would you mind letting us know what you thought about the motion as a whole? Or just what you thought about the points in general, or if there was anything specific you would like to add, other than it was a great debate? You can unmute and speak. Saad? Or do you prefer to type in chat? Saad, are you here? I'm going to pick on you. Saad. Saad. You just typed in chat. I know you were here. All right, fine. Till then, let's see, who else is there?
There's a question on YouTube from Zara.
Okay.
Can we know any real life examples from opposing side?
Opposition.
Yes, can you please ask that question again? Like, what sort of real life example do you want? Like, for what? For which purpose?
Zara, could you type again, please?
I'm just asking you to rephrase the question. Like, what sort of evidence do you want? For which instance? Like, which argument did we mention for which you want an evidence?
I don't think we've gotten a clarification on that yet.
It's okay. In the meantime, I mean, what was it? Could you please repeat the question?
The question was just, can we know any real life examples from opposing side?
Okay, so opposing side, could you please let us know of the examples that you mentioned so far?
Sure. Like for funding, we had examples about how almost the clinical trials make up the largest portion of bringing each new drug to the market. Like it costs around billions of dollars. And also the amount of research, also the amount of clinical trials that take place every year is so huge that it's just impossible for government to fund all of them. For example, in 2019 itself, the amount of clinical trials that took place were like around 200,000. So those are some statistics. And for examples, if you want like a specific one of where like a company got their license taken because of not like properly funding a research, we give an example of a company named Theranos. It was in 2018. So yeah, that's all I can think of for now.
All right, there's no clarification. The specific question was for companies that were, can you know any real life examples from opposing side for companies that were able to survive without getting any funds?
Can you please rephrase that question?
For companies that were able to survive without getting any funds, that's the clarification given.
It's in chat, Aisha.
Okay.
I think the debate today is not about like where the companies get their funds from, but rather if we are banning the pharmaceutical companies themselves from funding these researchers or not. So we're not talking about where the companies are getting their funds from, because obviously it's like from their profit and business and everything, right? But the only solution that the government provided was about like the proposition side provided was how the government would introduce corporate tax and all of that, and we just said no, it's not realistic, because these companies themselves are the only entities who actually have that sort of money to fund these researchers. So I guess to answer your question, it's not about where the companies are getting their funds from. It's about if we should allow the pharmaceutical companies to fund their own research or not.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have anything they would like to add? I see Sad left the call. He ran away from me. I will find him soon.
Okay, can I add something?
Yes, please go ahead.
So in the YouTube chat, they mentioned like in the current situation, the money was available for research, yet Pfizer still did research on its own. Why? So the reason for this is Pfizer was not just Pfizer was doing research on the say the drugs. Johnson and Johnson was also doing the research. Moderna was also doing the research. Each company was, how do I say, on a race to just get the drug as soon as possible. And if there was funding provided to the companies by say a charity or a government or anything like that, then then it would be unfair, and that's not how business really works. So that's not what really happens in real life. The companies, if they are doing any research, they have to secure it on their own from their own products and the profits that they make. In very rare cases, in governments like in Russia and China, there are companies which are funded by the government itself, but those are not private companies. Those cannot come under the scope of this debate. So to answer the question, for companies that were able to survive without getting any funds, I don't think any company fits under that. The purpose of the company is to make its own profits, its own money, and do the research on its own as an, how do I say, an independent body. Yeah.
Basically what you're talking about is like these vaccine development, and obviously they need to have trials for these vaccines. We're talking about medications or products that that need to basically be trialed in any clinical trials or whatnot. And the COVID vaccine, for example, that was a very extreme case, and because we needed it in the most like the fastest way possible. So obviously, like these companies had to fund their own research for the benefit of the whole, for everyone. But when it comes to other companies where they have, where they're just mass producing the same, like there are already medication that are on the shelf that are cheaper, that are that have already shown a lot of benefit, and that have been used for the past 20 or 30 years, or how many ever years. Okay, and now you as a pharmaceutical company, you start to pump out research about your medication, even though the original one that was already put on the shelves was probably much better than yours. You know what I mean? So that's why we do not want these biases. And once we eliminate these biases, that's when we will know if these medications are of any good. And it is like a scientific, like everyone in the scientific community knows that when a pharmaceutical company funds their own research for the drugs, it will lead to biases. No matter how hard you try to control them, there will always be methodological biases, or just biases within the agenda itself. Like what part of the research are you going to test? For example, there are some medications that the pharmaceutical company will start to direct the research in a certain way, rather than showing the bad side of the medication. So they only want to show the favorable side of the medication, rather than maybe focusing on the potential side effects of that medication. So there are nuances within research that your opposition team seems to be like neglecting or not mentioning,
Okay, can I reply to that?
Yeah, go for it.
All right.
Was it neglecting or was it not?
No, we're not, obviously. I think when it comes to neglecting, it was actually the proposition team neglecting. So you're talking about extreme cases like the COVID, right? So to refute that, let's just say that we gave that as an example, just to show you that what happens when there is an extreme situation. Like, imagine if we actually just depended upon the government in this extreme case, and just depended on the government to fund the vaccine production, right? What would have happened? Like a huge amount of of people would lose their lives, and we wouldn't have Pfizer and Moderna and as effective vaccines as them. Okay, that's the first point. And then you talked about how there are already cheaper and effective medicines existing, and the companies just keep on trying to make like other medicines that may be less effective. But isn't medicine all about making products that are more effective every single year? You just want them to be more effective. It should be better. It must have better quality. It must save more lives, remove the side effects. That is what medicine is about. That is what medicine is striving to make sure that the research they do, they always have a result where we can find like better and more effective drugs, right? And lastly, about bias that you said, well, we already said that we accept the current situation is not perfect. We're not saying it's like perfectly fine just to let pharmaceutical companies blindly do these things. No, there is a reason why the double-blinded trials were introduced, and there can be a lot of other solutions that can be introduced to improve the current system, rather than the solution that you provided that just change the whole system and just let government come in right out of nowhere. That's just going to cause a huge problem, because it's changing the entire system, and then you don't even know if it's going to be a good system, because we talked about corruption and all of that. So yeah, that's just my reply. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And now we have our judges back with a deliberation. So on the motion that this House believes that pharmaceutical companies should be banned from funding research done in their own medications or products, I would like to give the floor to AQ. Here.
Firstly, thank you all for being here today. And I see a lot of the chats in there, a lot of questions happening, interaction. I hope, inshallah, we all learn something different and new in debating. Just to remind you of what will happen right now, excuse me. To the 4 judges, we came back with a positive decision, alhamdulillah. And before telling the results to you all, what will happen is each of the 4 judges will give you an initial 1-minute feedback on the positive side without telling you the results, obviously. And then it will be the chief judge, sorry, that is myself, inshallah. In the end, I will tell you which team won the debate and why they won the debate, and give you a proper analysis of how things went, hopefully in the coming 5 to 8 minutes. So firstly, Dr. Asusu, you can please go ahead and tell your 1-minute remark and feedback to our speakers. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Actually, I'm very thrilled to sit and listen to both sides, the arguments and the facts and the discussions that been raised. It was a very difficult decision. I'm not going to tell you my decision, but you both did a great job in highlighting the pros and cons of allowing pharmaceutical companies to fund research or ban them from funding research. The proposing team brought out very clearly the main problem when pharmaceuticals fund research. They tend to create bias and hide the unfavorable reasons, and it's all for profit. We know, at least in the United States, pharmaceutical lobby even affects the election, right? So for the opposing team, they also did a great job to rebuttal that bias is well controlled, because we have clinical trials, we have all the regulation in place, and they showed us that the value of covering basic science research through funding would bring better healthcare solutions. So I don't want to give more feedback than that, except that I'm very proud to be here with you all and hear to the depth of the arguments that both sides had brought to the table. Well done, everyone. Bravo.
Thank you, Dr. Asusu, for keeping it in a more brief fashion. Thank you very much for that. And your valuable input is there to help students to learn and experience new things as academics, as students, and inshallah as future medical practitioners, scientists, and people engaging in positive change in the society. Thank you, Dr. Asusu, for that. Now I'll invite Ahmed Daniel for his feedback or comments, I would say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Quddus. First of all, a big congrats to both of the teams. I think they did a very good job, especially with the points being presented. Both of the teams did put up some very convincing points. And not only that, but we saw that the opposing team did also try, both of the teams did try to rebut the points as well. And so that showed that both of the teams were, first of all, listening very keenly to the other team's points, picking up the points, and then trying to rebut those points. So that was very good to see. That it was a very focused debate, and everyone was aware of the points going through. And so there was a very nice flow and understanding to the whole debate. The only thing I'd say is that in your motion, one of the points that I think probably could have been brought up more was that this house believes that pharmaceutical companies should be banned to do research on their own products. So maybe the point about own products rather than a general, that point could have been brought up more. But other than it was a wonderful debate. I was very happy to be a part of it, to judge, and congrats to both of the teams. You guys truly deserve it and did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Daniel, for that wonderful feedback. Now we'll move on to Ms. Jasna to give her comments on the debate and the speakers.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all the debaters for this wonderful debate. If you guys don't know, I'm from a medical background, and for me as a student, as well as an adjudicator, it was very interesting just to like watch and listen to the points that you guys were making. And we had a very interesting discussion in the judges breakout room. And I will just briefly go over the most, my favorite points from both these sides. So from the proposition side, I really liked your alternative solution of creating a regulatory third-party body. And I was really looking forward to hearing more about it. I also liked how you guys painted your entire case, like mainly based on the research bias and how private profit can have harmful effects on the public health in general. And you give a lot of valid examples, and you kind of posed a question about, is government corruption greater than pharma corruption as it exists today? And that was very interesting. From the proposition side, I really liked how you convinced us that private companies are best suited to fund research and how it's a win-win situation for all the parties involved. I also liked how you guys showed us there's plenty of room for improvement to make it less biased in the private sector via peer reviews and double-blinded studies and journals. You guys also give us a lot of examples that are relevant to the current times. So we really enjoyed that. I would say overall, it was like a very focused debate, and it was a very good effort from both the sides.
Thank you, Jasna. Now for the time we have been waiting for from the last hour and 50 minutes. Oh, wow, we already have drum rolls happening in the chat here. And okay, let me tell you his initial feedback, and we'll go with the results and which thing meant. Firstly, giving the positive feedback from both the sides. Let's keep a bit more suspense in there to engage people more. All right, so on both sides, I think Jazakumullah khair. Thank you, Dr. Susu, Ustad Ahmed Daniel, and Ustad Jasna for your positive feedback and comments on our speakers. Aisha, don't cry, it's fine. You can just wait for some more time, it's fine. Now, what will happen is, first I'll tell you the main point of the debate, and then I'll tell you the results and tell you why the team that wins took the debate. It may take 5 to 8 minutes to give a proper explanation, inshallah, and I hope I don't go over time because some of us have to leave at 9 or 9:05, so we can extend probably max 5 minutes from the time we have given to you, that is 9 p.m. Qatar. Now, from the analysis that was provided by both the sides, initially we all felt that it was a very strong opening coming from side proposition, and we feel the idea of problems existing in medicine. We do actually acknowledge and understand that these problems do exist because, mashallah, 3 of the panelists are from medical background, leaving me, I'm from a business background. So I can see the business perspective of ethics as well, and money and profit and possible corruption. So obviously that's there. I'm being an experienced judge and speaker. Now, looking from the experience of the 3 judges who are from medical background and what they have actually supported the idea of what medical issues do exist and the biases and the concerns that are there in the society right now, or in the medical field, the pharmaceutical field that we see. On the other side as well, we see the idea of how bad research is obviously harmful for the society, but at the same time, the concerns of funding and how on the overall society benefits, because if you're not funding, what will happen to the research itself and how the overall harm will be done in society because the funding is not there. So what will happen to the medicines and the pharmaceutical sector as a whole? And then comes the solution from side of the proposition when they spoke about the idea and concept of let's have this independent body of government who's going to fund all these things, who's going to probably oversee these aspects, and banning these pharmaceutical companies from doing research. That's one. And number 2 is the idea of how we have the funding coming up from the corporate side and the corporate sector going to the government and government funding these companies to do the research. But as pointed out by Ahmed Daniel and the other judges correctly, that the idea of doing research in your own medications and products, right? That is one important idea. Regardless of you self-funding your own research or the government funding you what do you call researching on your own product. That was kind of missing. It did come up on the on the shallow side of the debate from both sides, but did not go into details. But since both sides did not speak into it in details, we'll just leave this out from the debate of the discussion, and we'll come back to it later if it's deemed to be important. Then comes the idea of side opposition. We're talking about how, if at all you have funding going through or why the government, how these companies, or because of corruption, and how there are only few countries around the world who actually follow the clear, transparent kind of corruption issue, where it's more transparent, so corruption may not happen, but majority of the world, we don't actually can convince the governments to put this money or redirect the corporate tax money towards only research, because the industry is $1.2 trillion of industry has came up from side government. So if you're refunding or reallocating the money from the corporate taxes, even though you're increasing it and reallocating to research, how much of it will it be possible to give by the government side? Honestly, it's a very good question happening from their side. So the idea of funding coming up there and who gets how much funding, and the other government concerns about welfare of the people, healthcare, education, all those sort of things. But side government comes up and says, guys, we are talking about people's life here, right? So it's life of people versus you're talking about education and other beneficial factors, welfare of whatever kind they are. So we're talking about research of people, research in pharmacy, because people are dying because of this. And this is also important to fund the research, and government will actually fund the research because we have the concept of saving people's life through these medications. That is the idea coming from side proposition to support this kind of mitigating factor that the opposition has brought up to us. Then comes the idea from side opposition that, guys, we're talking about bias. Even though we think it may exist in the area, we think it's much more stronger to have a regulation over them and extra regulation from the government side. Do not go in details, but the government, if at all you need the solution, you can give this as kind of a solution of putting extra regulations. But coming on the academic side of it, when you publish a research, it's backed up by double-blinded side research publishing, and they have to sign conflict of interest certifications or agreements with publishers and editorial boards, and they're highly peer-reviewed. So it's the error of bias is extremely low in these kind of academic publications. So the concept and idea of being or publishing something wrong or that is incorrect while clinical trials through the academic sector or the academic paradigm will be really less, and that harm will be negated. And then we had the last two speakers, I mean to say the whip speakers on both sides. They came up and they supported their ideas, and they were going against the sides, the opposing sides, saying why their side should win and why the other side's points were not so correct or why they should not stand. And then we had the reply speakers who came to us and summarized the speech for us, telling what points are important for us to consider in this debate and how the idea of biasness works on either side. But both the reply speakers rightly spoke about the biases, because that was an important point. The idea of funding, the responsibility of the government, the reputation of the companies, how it matters. And then obviously supporting the whip speakers, who did a pretty good job, we think, in terms of taking out the points of the opposing sides. Now, we have bigger drum rolls coming in the chat rooms, and let's see who takes debate. On a majority basis, okay, it was a close thing. Let us see on the YouTube chat box who says which team wins. Quickly, 30 seconds. And in Zoom chat box, let's see who wins the debate. On their side, at least, we have the vote of the audience, and we have the vote of the judges as well, the learned people, mashallah. And based on the overall scoring of both the judges, that is the 4 judges that we have, and the audience, the team that wins is team opposition. Congratulations, team opposition, for winning this debate. So it was a majority call from the judges' side that team opposition wins, and also the audience voted for team opposition as being the stronger team based on the argumentations. Now, please remember this, since we have 3 minutes remaining and probably extend by 2 minutes more to have the the thanks speech from our organizers and the people and our organizing committee and who organized this debate, thanking Dr. Asusu, our judges, our wonderful audience here, and obviously the speakers without whom this debate would not have gone ahead. Please remember this. Both the sides debated because it was a toss, it was a random side that was selected. So because the 3 speakers or the 4 speakers of side proposition did not choose their side to debate this, we as independent committee, we chose a side for them, for both side proposition and side opposition. Please remember there is a public competition debate. So whatever the speaker spoke, it is completely for a competition and that is it. It is not particularly their personal opinion. So please do not chasm this and say, we saw you say this, and it is not fair for anyone to catch one of the speakers and say you said this or you said X, Y, or Z. It is a debate, it is a motion. Thirdly, when we judge a motion around that is competition or public debate, we judges have to keep our personal opinions to our side. Even though we think that one side spoke, their arguments did matter, but how much did they actually explain in this particular debate? For us, that mattered as well. Because we have time limitations, and that's why we want you to convince us in this particular time to win the round or win this debate competition. We do agree that your points were strong on both the sides, but when it comes to the academic perspective on different ideologies, just if you can give me 1 minute more to explain this perspective, I think it will be much more clear why the team that has won the debate. On side opposition, they give us the idea of how academic scrutiny is extremely strong, and when it comes to publishing research and medical science, it's extremely difficult. So the biasness and that kind of ethical issue goes down extremely low. And when we had a discussion, we had our honorable chief guest also sharing with us the ideas that yes, that's actually true. But where could be possible issue or is that's highlighted by such proposition is in the idea of the companies that could be playing around with the ethical and post publishing of this research, how they push through their own funding to go into the negative direction and pushing their own medications, and that could be wrong. But that's what we wanted to come into deeper sense from side proposition, because we do not see anything against the academic perspective that was coming in from side proposition against side opposition's point of academic research. That is an extremely strong point. Also on the point of funding, we thought side opposition takes this debate on funding because that is an extremely important and vital point in this debate. If you do not have funding, how it will go? Even though you mentioned the corporate tax, side opposition spoke about, guys, it's extremely difficult for you to redirect and reallocate all this funding from government to the research sector. What could be an alternative? I'm giving a solution could be that whatever private companies are funding that their own research, that research development funding can go through a government agency, independent and transparent, of which the private companies and governments could be part of this committee and whose all working is transparent and independent. They can allocate the money to different companies to do research and the competitors' products or other such product that can be done by 1 or 2 companies to have a fair outcome that could be inclusive of academicians, to be much more fair, that could be inclusive of scientists who are in the industry itself and government regulators. So that could have been a better solution from my perspective, my personal perspective. So you could have guarded your side and solution much more, because we felt the idea of funding, the idea of once a half-heartedly approach to what could be the problem only on the industry and not focusing that on the other side of how academics is done, and the possible problems from the industry should have been your core issue from the beginning till the end. For all these reasons, team opposition takes it, but team proposition, good job as well. All of the 8 speakers, good job, amazing job, and we hope to see you inshallah in the future rounds and the future not round, sorry. I'm still in my world's debate competition mode. In the upcoming tournaments, in the upcoming events, inshallah ta'ala azza wa jal. Thank you all for being here. It was wonderful judging with my panel today, Dr. Asusu, Mr. Ahmed Daniel, and Ms. Jasna. Thank you very much. You all have a nice evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh from my side. Over to the organizers for the closing comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I may say just a quick thing, thank you very much for moderating this panel, and just food for thought for the future. When we have an imminent pressing problem that facing public health, like what we've seen in COVID or meningitis outbreaks in sub-Saharan Africa, the philanthropic effect or funding from community with industry, with academia, with governmental institutions, come together in a collaborative form and one intention. We want to solve the problem for a non-profit. Just provide vaccines instead of a dose for $100 will cost $0.5. That solves a problem. We are coming into an era of losing our antibiotics. Relying on companies to produce new antibiotics, we will lose the case for sure. Right now, there is initiative with the WHO and several global entities to have everyone on board, from industry to philanthropic community to governments, to have this funding for targeting a specific problem. And I think that would bring the best benefit to the community without affecting the market and the business, because pharmaceuticals, they're there to make profit. We cannot tell them don't make profit, but we create a new form of regulation and funding to address critical, pressing medical issues and health need. And with that, I stop, and I really enjoyed it. Tremendous debate. Thank you, guys. Congrats to all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Susu, for your kind words and very, very informative, short closing remarks. We truly appreciate your attendance today, and thank you so much again for accepting our invitation. It's a huge honor for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. It was great to be with you.
Thank you so
Assalamu
much.
alaikum, everyone. Bye.
So guys, on behalf of all of the organizing committee, we thank you so much for attending this debate. I personally did really enjoy it very much, and I hope you did as well. Congrats to the team opposition, and hard luck to team proposition. You guys, you both did really well, but you know, at the end of the day, we have to choose just one winner. And today we might have had actually two winners by the amazing arguments you both did. So that's all from me. If anyone else wants to add anything, please feel free to do so. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd just like to say something. On behalf of Qatar University English Debate Club, we are privileged and honored that we were asked to be part of this collaborative event with QMSA SCORE, with Student Researcher Association at Weill Cornell. We look forward to a lot more collaborations, and we feel like public debates and having these sort of collaborative events are very beneficial, not only just to the speakers, but to the general public on raising awareness on issues that may not be talked about as much. For example, research-based issues. I feel like today's motion would have shed a lot of light, and arguments as well would have shed a lot of light on current issues that we are having that people may not necessarily be aware of, because I mean, half the news we see is about the West in America. So getting to know research-based ideas and solutions, and just going on about that and getting ideas from that, I feel would be very beneficial. And I would again like to thank everybody that came and participated today, whether you debated, whether you watched, whether you are organizing, part of the organizing committee, whether you judged. Thank you for, to everyone that participated and helped make this event a successful one. Thank you.
So I think this brings the event to an end. Again, thank you all for attending today, and I hope to see you all in our upcoming events, either organized by SCORE, the SRA at Cornell, or the QUADC. So we really hope to see you very soon.